Hey, welcome and happy Thursday. It is my macro to micro power hour with a feature on women in trading and finance. My name is Samantha LaDuc. I'm founder of LaDucTrading.com, and I am very glad to be able to do this afternoon gig twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I do it with Jonathan Gibbons on VigTech, where we dig into market structure. We really talk about particular themes of the moment and also dig into option and option flow and intermarket analysis. And on Thursday, I have a guest captain interview, and we dig into all types of very specific types or modalities of analysis. Some is quant, some is Fed Treasury issuance. It's random, but it's always very insightful and profitable. Today, I'm excited to be joined by Katie Stockton, who is founder of Fairlead Strategies, and she is my guest today. I can't tell you, I'm really impressed because she's hard to get. Now, this is her website, by the way, fairleadstrategies.com. And after this particular webinar interview, I will be posting on my YouTube channel, LaDuc Trading YouTube channel. You can kind of scroll down. You'll see I've got a number of playlists, Power Hour and Women in Trading and Finance. It's all in here. This is also a podcast, so it will be released on Apple and Spotify and Audible. Just trying to kind of get some attention to this topic that there are some very impressive women in trading and finance that needs to be basically, I think, highlighted. And Katie, you are one I am very excited to talk with because I have seen you on TV, of course, and followed you when you were working for an institutional firm, and then you went out on your own. So very excited to, again, have you come in and share market views, but also have you just present because there are very many, if you will, men who are in this profession and women I want to inspire and elevate and also kind of bring in more to this career, and they need to see what they can be. So thank you very much for joining me.
Of course, I'm super happy to be here with you, and I think it's a great endeavor that you've undertaken here, both with the markets and obviously your support of women in the business.
Yeah, and this is, like I said, I've seen you on, the promotional trail, if you will, of giving analysis, and you do it in such a very measured, approach where there's not a lot of just drama. It's very strong structural analysis.
I don't need any more drama in my life. I have three
It's
children, so that's
right
plenty.
here. I've raised three teenagers. That's
Me
why I'm a
too.
volatility trader, I swear. So tell me a little bit, because I'd love to get some background information, and I know women want to know how you got to where you are.
Well, yeah, thanks again for the nice introduction. My name is Katie Stockton, and I'm a technical analyst. So that's defined my career really over the past almost 25 years at this point. I started my career really in college. I was a finance major, and that gave me exposure, of course, to all things Wall Street. But I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do until I had an internship, and it was at a broker dealer, a small, sort of local financial advisory office. And one of the advisors had on his desk a piece of paper with a bunch of X's and O's, and you could guess what that was. It was point
Hmm.
and figure charts, and I was intrigued. It was a very visual sort of learning tool for me to understand the markets, and I was fortunate enough to pick up an internship with Dorsey Wright and Associates, who put
Mm,
me on the right footing for a career in technical analysis. They really helped
indeed.
launch me into what I still do today now, in my own capacity, which is really exciting. It was just about 3 years ago that I started Fairlead Strategies, and had previously been in different seats in larger broker dealers, sort of chief market technician or technical strategist type roles, and always publishing research and providing consulting services primarily to institutions over the years. And I really enjoyed that, and sort of, I'd say, built my methodology by working with some fantastic mentors along the way. And I'm so grateful to them for, giving me the tools that I now use and have made my own. And for helping me keep it somewhat simple, but not so simple that we're not always humbled by the markets, of course.
Oh yeah.
So it's been great, and I'm really happy to be doing it now in a capacity where I can see my kids more and prioritize, being at home, which is awesome.
And less travel, I would assume. But
Yes, for
what
sure.
when you're looking at making that transition, um, the work life balance obviously driving you for that transition into your independent boutique research. How has that transition gone? How have you been received? In other words, the clients, not having any issues, the fact that you're a woman, that you're well known, you're well respected. How's it been?
I mean, I really haven't looked back in terms of the transition. I miss, parts of working for BTIG, MKM Partners, and others. I love the camaraderie. I had great teammates, and they're great firms. But being on your own, you really can't match in terms of the autonomy for one, but also you really you own it. It's
Mm-hmm.
very exciting to see an idea be put to work almost straight away, and that's really been such a gift that I could pull this off in a way. And the clients that I had, I mean, listen, some stayed with me, some didn't. It's a much different structure that I have now at this firm where we're offering my research via subscription.
Mm-hmm.
One of my main, I guess, impetuses to leave Wall Street was because I wanted to widen my reach to the retail investor, individual investor, and also investment advisors, because that was a group that I could not reach previously in my old seat. And I always felt like there was a great demand for technical analysis on that front. And certainly they are some of the hungriest people out there in terms of learning and trying to educate themselves about the markets
Yeah.
using the charts, which I think is just one of these amazing disciplines. I don't think it's a standalone discipline necessarily, but it's something that everyone should use.
So when you are talking about the reached for retail, high net worth, I would assume those are more sophisticated in managing their own money, or really newbies who are just looking for that type of bigger picture technical analysis. What do you find more?
I'm not discriminating against any type of client. And I mean that genuinely. I really think that there's something in it for everyone. We provide top down views about the market. So we talk about the S&P 500 and directional biases and ways to position important levels, things like that will help folks that are just trying to either maybe trade the spiders, as simple as that, triple Qs, and then we of course drill it into the sector rotation work, and that's maybe a little bit more sophisticated. But there's such a growing interest in ETFs that are so easy to
Mm-hmm.
trade, that and now people can express views in these sectors so easily. So I found that even folks that you wouldn't consider to be sophisticated are really taking it upon themselves to get more involved in the markets. I mean, there's kids out there trading.
Oh my, yep.
It's yeah,
It,
it's really cool to see. And I'll even show my kids a chart, and it's going up and to the right, and I say, does that look good or bad to you? They say good. It's just sort of
teaching
human
moment.
nature, right? Just to have that understanding of how to take advantage of the markets, I think is really fantastic to see young folks taking an interest in that. I think about my alma mater and how they have a student managed investment fund that was always very popular, but now it's like you can't even get in. It's so competitive. So there's really a growing interest out there. And the charts that we provide, they are very technical, as you can imagine, with a lot of indicators. But the interpretation is very clear and concise, and with a directional bias that I think can add some value. We're not trying to be super predictive in what we're doing, but rather trying to help folks manage risk and try to understand where there might be some opportunities. There's nothing wrong with market timing, as you know. I mean, listen, it used to have sort of a bad reputation, but my thought is, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you try to time the market? Why wouldn't you try to add to a stock closer to support where the odds are more in your favor? That type of thing. So,
But it's
you know,
also timing the market is being able to spy divergences before the volatility enters and the risk
mm,
enters. So I like very much to time the market because to me that's risk management.
That's exactly right. Yeah, to be able to identify these important levels is really a great skill to have, and it's not something that you can become really. There's no room for perfectionism, right? I mean, these
Oh,
are
yes. I like the expression that trading is not a game of perfect.
yes, I like that too. And I think about that with
Not a game of perfect.
with support and resistance levels, when you're looking for an area where there might be buyers stepping in, it's never a precise point, right? So you can say we're watching, say, the 200-day moving average as a support level. Well, let's say that's 100.00. The chances that that stock actually holds up right at that round number is pretty much zero. But we can think of it more as a cushion, and I think that's sort of a testament to the imperfection of the market. And it's like that because there's just so many different market participants. So what we can use the charts for is to try to understand how those participants are acting, what levels they might get interested, or quite the opposite. So I think we're all at this point pretty adept at identifying prevailing trends. You can just visualize it with
Yeah.
some moving averages. But what becomes harder is to try to understand when those trends are maturing. I think that's the hard part, and that's what we try to do.
I like very much this independence, if you will, of thinking, because then I can collect or scan and synthesize data into context without any one particular modality. So I like to be able to look at some of the fundamental and definitely macro as a backdrop and live on my intermarket analysis. Technical to me is very critical for low risk entry and when to enter and exit a trade,
Mhm.
but I want to know also why something is moving. Do you ever get into the
I'm more of a what person. So
the what, why?
it's funny because it's true. The charts will not answer that question
Yeah,
why, and it's a question I often get, and I often have to deflect a little bit because they're not going to tell you what the drivers are necessarily. You make the assumption, if you're really a purist when you're using charts, that there are drivers, that they're usually fundamental and macro in nature.
yeah, and they're
Sometimes they're
priced
technical,
in.
but
In
very
other words,
rarely.
so
Yeah.
Mark Newton is someone who actually recommended that I talk with you a while back because of you were going out on your own, and I was really encouraged by that. But the fun the focus on technical analysis that you have stayed true, he has as well, and it's a very good approach, if you will, of kind of creating compartments of flow in the technical world, and not getting distracted by the narrative. You both, to your credit, have done that extremely well. So
Yeah, Mark, he's an
it's
incredible technician.
yes,
The model of professionalism from my perspective, and his product is very strong, and it's because he's disciplined in how he focuses on the markets, and I think that's what differentiates a good technician is someone who can, really adhere to the indicators, not let the emotions get too or not cloud things too much, and not get married to different views or positions. It's a pretty hard thing to do. We all get sort of convicted behind a certain bias, right? And we're all human in that way, and sometimes it's really difficult to change with the market, but that's something that we're trying to do with the indicators. The indicators are going to take out some of that emotion or some of the gray area in deciding if something's going up or down. You can't argue with a buy signal on a MACD indicator or something like that, right?
you
It's either
have your
there or it's not.
favorites, I'm sure, for indicators. Do you also create any your own?
I do. I create some market internal measures of breadth, which is participation, some things like that. I love some more obscure indicators like the cloud model, like the DeMark indicators. And I have my own parameters that I will tweak
Mhm.
at times for some of the more standard indicators. But I'd say first and foremost, I really am adhering to support and resistance levels. And then I kind of go to the indicators to try to inform whether or not we have an opportunity, near these levels. And I think that combination seems to be pretty powerful. But I'm very, very non-committal when we see breakouts and breakdowns. I'm pretty much unwilling to fight those, because I think that that is really the highest probability type of setup that you can see in a chart.
Do you have any particular time frame that you really prefer, or do you look across time frames for
I
confirmation?
guess, yeah, I guess we all have a preferred time frame. So for me, it's probably weeks, not months, but also not days. And so I don't know if you want to call that short or intermediate term, maybe somewhere in between. But I always have an eye to the long term. So I call it, to sound fancy, I call it multiple time frame analysis, which really means I'm looking at a monthly bar, a weekly bar, and a daily bar
Okay.
simultaneously. And then I'll do some intraday work in the mornings for my morning note. The long term setup obviously informs your views on the intermediate term and the short term setup. So as an example, if you're looking at a long-term chart and that's very clearly in an uptrend with positive long-term momentum, well, you'd be more inclined to act on an oversold upturn or something like that on a weekly chart, just knowing that that's the bias.
I love to. I have a live trading room where I have three time frames up at all times: the
Mhm.
hour, the day, and the week. They're side by side all the time, all 3 hours. There are chasers, there are swing traders, and there are trend traders, and so that's
Mhm.
why I kind of correspond the hour, the day, and the week. But it's also, for me anyway, you can start to see some behavior from the inside out, but
Mhm.
it's always the grandparent, the parent, and the child.
Yes,
So
so
the
I like that.
grandparent has the
Three
most
generations of
authority.
charts. That's great.
So the grandparent is the weakly, obviously, and has the most kind
Yeah.
of authority, and can control the behavior of the smaller time
Yeah,
frames,
I like that.
whether they know it or not.
Very good. That's right.
So
That's the
I like
boss.
that. But clients are very different as far as their experience or their
Mhm.
comfort and their speed, that kind of thing. So that's pretty much why I have that hourly, but not less. And people who can trade off a 2 minute chart just amaze me. But
I know,
I,
I know. Yeah. And I mean, with the computers that we have now at our disposal and the software, it's like the world is our oyster. I mean, there's really, so much we can do over such shorter time horizons, right? It's just a matter of, how chained to your desk can you be? I
yeah.
mean, when the volatility is very high, I'll give some color, to the folks that I have in a chat room. I'll give color on like the intraday swings in the S&P futures, because I know that some of these clients are trading. They're trading
Oh
far
yeah.
more actively than I ever have or will. But they really care about these intraday swings, especially when things, see a pickup in volatility. So I fully understand, if you're a trader at a big asset manager and you're given an order and you had to complete that order within the next 2 days, yeah, well, you're going to care a whole lot about those intraday swings.
And it's not just the trading desks at banks and hedge funds and the rest. I mean, the ARC funds that are going in and out daily. It's very
Mhm.
much a day trading, active
Yeah, I
trading
would think so. And
transition
there's some things that really
change.
lend themselves to that with the volatility that they have inherently to them. And maybe that changes or goes away, right? There was a while there where I was just kind of day trading some of these, cryptocurrency funds, because I just felt, I said, well, gosh, that they're up 7% one day, down 13% the next. These high single digit or low double digit returns in a day, were something that I felt I could take advantage of. And then it just got a bit tiresome for me. So I moved on to the next thing.
But it is an
Um,
asset class, and I'm curious how institutional clients are also perceiving it. Are they migrating, or I should say, diversifying from bonds into a Bitcoin?
well,
Are
there's
they?
there's definitely widespread interest from my client base, which ranges from the individual all the way up to a large pension fund. And that interest, I suspect, in a lot of cases, is more personal at this time, as opposed to a reflection of the institution's interest in investing. But it just continues to grow, to the extent that we just added a product, focused only on cryptocurrencies, a weekly report, primarily with deep dives in Bitcoin and Ether, and then we'll do some relative strength work on some of the other cryptocurrencies relative to the, Bitcoin indices. And that's been pretty well received. Folks just have this interest because it's almost like an early adoption type of, cycle right now. So you're seeing with that these almost parabolic up moves and massive base breakouts. So I think it's with good reason that people are taking interest in that, and maybe they feel like it's a little bit too early. But I don't think it's going away. I think as soon as we see more products hit the tape, which we have done already to some degree, an ETF would be a great way for folks that are a little bit hesitant to set up a wallet or something like this. They'll feel like they can access that market, and well, if an ETF hits the market, then there's some regulatory framework there that wasn't there before. Things like that are going to just I'd say contribute to the comfort level of institutions and being there. And it's an uncorrelated asset, at least at this point. So that's what a lot of institutions are really interested in, is ways to get a different kind of exposure. And I think it lends itself well to that as well. So I think it's just going to grow and grow, and with that we'll probably see a long-term uptrend. Maybe that has a less steep slope than we have right now, but something that asserts itself over the long term.
Do you have any particular feel right now on your technical analysis, which is a little bit different than a macro read on inflation and what's happening right now in the backdrop of commodities? They're very, very tradable and a lot of fun, but as it relates to the durability of this move.
Yeah, I know. And there's been a lot of debate about that. Is it transient? Is it not? And I can't really add to the debate, as you can imagine, from a macro perspective. But when I look at the trends, if I look at copper prices as a great example, or lumber prices, I mean, you see it, right? These are very steep uptrends and they've been persistent. And you continue to see these breakouts that support upside follow through, not even just in the intermediate term, but also the long term. Because if you take a step back and look at crude oil as one case in point,
Yep.
it's reversed like a 2-decade downtrend. So I do think that there's some pretty major reversals that have occurred with the momentum that we've seen in that space. So that would suggest, of course, that it's probably here to stay. Now, in the near term, there are some signs of exhaustion that it gives me like a little pause and going
100%.
out and
Yep.
adding exposure to lumber here, right?
Yep.
But with a pullback, then I think we probably have another opportunity and we'll see some upside follow through. Gold prices are a little bit different. We're watching them. It's kind of interesting. Not quite sure what to make of it, but the price of
I
gold is
agree.
okay. Good. Well, that makes me feel
I have
better.
very firm convictions about lumber. I've been, and the value and the cyclical rotation, and some really good, smells on oil. But gold, it's right now it's a
So
little bit
I
weak.
think we need to, yeah, take, I guess, our biases out of it, right? And that's what's been hard to do because, I mean, gold prices, they've been in this persistent long-term downtrend channel since the summer months.
August, yep.
So every relief rally has failed. And while part of me thinks that there's a very good reason for them to continue higher here, we have short-term sell signals from the DeMark indicators. It's right up into the 200-day moving average, which is kind of rolled over.
Yep.
And you have some resistance based on the cloud model, which tends to hold relevance for commodity prices. So I'm like, I don't know. It's at a proving ground as
Yep.
how my message has been. I just think, it needs to get through this 1850 level, or, let's just call it neutral.
Yep. Yep. Bonds and gold both. They tend to be very much highly correlated, much more so than the dollar. So, how far out do you look when clients are saying, "Okay, what do we do with the dollar?" I mean, because obviously this does
Yeah.
not move like Jagger. It takes
Mm-mm.
many, 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 many months, and it is really not, except in a crisis, of course, going to move dramatically. So,
Right, right. So I almost use the dollar as a bit of a macro cue for folks. I can give a technical bias, but my assumption is usually that people are using it not as like a trading vehicle, but as a way to inform themselves on emerging market relative
as a
strength.
hedge too.
As a hedge, right? So more to inform their other positions is how I sort of approach it, I guess. That said, it is still a downtrend when you look at the cloud model. there is very strong long-term support for the dollar, and I think that it will probably hold. So I don't think there's a lot of downside as it stands. It doesn't appear like there's a lot of upside either, but the oversold condition I think will help alleviate the downside momentum that we've seen very recently. But that it just is probably sort of a testament to what you just said. It's probably going nowhere fast.
Yeah. So when the market has this type of gyration the 3 days, right? The Monday turned at like 230, 220 and gapped down Tuesday and then continued hard selling. And on a daily, it was kind of lucky. Noticed it had popped out of the Bollinger Band in a really tight squeeze, and those are typically really strong rejections. But it literally went from the top of the Bollinger Band to the bottom of the Bollinger Band, which is 2.5 standard deviations in 3 days, which is very quick. So obviously this afternoon bounce is a little reflexive, but in your models, do you go into that type of granularity of this is a risk right here? I mean, like, or are you still, as I can see, with the trend, the 10-week on a weekly is still hasn't broken. So are you looking more at the trend of this index in particular, obviously, as being in danger after the past few days? What's your read now with the market?
So I definitely get caught up in that kind of volatility because I kind of it's hard to ignore, right? So our message has been very recently what we were calling for a pullback as of April 28th, I think is when we went bearish from a short-term perspective. And reason being was very simple. It was a loss of short-term momentum and a lot of counter trend signals from the DeMark indicators, all of which were very much short-term in nature. Now, with the pullback, that has been, of course, very dramatic in sort of the growth arena, especially impacting the NASDAQ 100 index. There's been some breakdowns and I'd call it retests of support that have been unsuccessful. So meaning you would expect and hope that something, one of these, let's take a software stock, comes down to the March low or to the 200-day moving average. You would hope to see some kind of stabilization there, but we saw a lot more breakdowns than I was comfortable with. So that to me indicates that it's maybe a bit more dramatic than something that we've seen in the last few months in terms of a pullback, maybe fall short of something that becomes a technical correction, the 20% or however you want to label it. But the reason I think that this bounce, which I do expect for it to last maybe 3 or 4 days, I think it'll fail and give way to one more downdraft. And I say it because the loss of short-term momentum for many stocks has become now a loss of intermediate-term momentum. And one of the ways I measure that is using the weekly MACD indicator. So it's a little bit more significant than the last pullbacks that we've seen. And then, of course, you have the growth versus value breakdown, which further differentiates it. So it feels a bit like a transitioning environment on the sector front. That's not a long-term issue, but it certainly seems to be one that could affect the market for a few weeks here, just given the footprint of technology as one example.
Do you ever use options expiration as a marker, if you will, because monthly options has so heavily influenced, if you will, dealer action?
I personally don't, but I get information from those who do. So I always find it really interesting. It's not something I base my analysis on. It's just not part of my process. But I definitely think there's magnets out there that make a lot of sense. I think it's sort of, if I could use that word, transient again. It's something that doesn't really tend to have implications beyond that day or the next day, from my perspective. So I like to make a note of it and then sort of move on. But listen, there's so many great tools out there. I would never minimize any of them because I think you can have success with things like short interest and money flows,
Oh,
Elliott
absolutely.
waves. There's a bazillion things that I don't use that people are able to use with a lot of success. So, I just think that once you have your methodology, just to stick to it, that's kind of the key.
When you're invited on TV to give your views, I'm just fascinated. How does that when did you get comfortable doing that, where you can sit there and in the time sometimes to tie your shoe, you have to give your market call, right, in a TV soundbite, because it's very difficult. We have this length of time, right, to discuss or to display, our reasoning. But when and luckily you've had a little bit more time to, experience doing this. But when I went on recently, I'm like, this is really hard to do.
Yeah,
This is like
it is.
really hard
Well,
to
I mean,
do.
it's almost like tell somebody to try to write something in bullets instead of write it out long form. That's really hard to do, right? So it's almost what you're doing when you're delivering that kind of message on air. You're taking, you're almost like isolating some very key points and trying to just focus on that. And that's always what I've tried to do. There are times at which I feel like it's successful, other times not so much. But I think that's the goal, is just kind of isolating your key messages, of which I try to never have more than three, just because I know I'll forget the fourth anyway. So
And
I
the
think it's a
time is
matter of just
short.
refining it.
And they
Yep.
also they interject with questions or posture, and it's like, I'm never going to get this out. I'm never going to get this out. Nope, didn't get out. No,
Yeah,
context
and
is
that's the thing,
lost.
right? So there's often times when you'll just you just miss something. You wanted to impart something and you don't do that, but then nobody knows. so
They forget,
so
it's like a meal. It gets digested and forgotten.
Yeah, I
So,
know. So
but
people
you've
don't
also
know what you don't say. I don't know. So my hope is that folks that really want to follow my views are willing
yeah.
to subscribe to my research, because it's episodic, is the way I would put it. Where in between an appearance on a TV show, there's a lot that can happen and a lot that does happen, and that's something we address regularly in our written product. But certainly on TV, there's little snippets here and there. But we can't have that consistent sort of episodic view to really help people.
Yeah, I do it in the form of, in my, of course, live commentary for 3 hours, not 3 minutes, from my live trading room, but also in my Slack for client workspace. I can distribute the analysis in quick order versus where I used to, which was obviously more considered, longer pieces, and then it wasn't so timely. So I've gone to the written long form to the very short form in Slack, and I think it's helpful for those who can, um, that want that rapid, kind of analysis. But it
Mhm.
does take something away from the elegance of forming a story.
I know, and I know that right. So there's value in the story too, right? So it's
Mhm.
almost like there's demand for both, and if you can do both, that's great. But most people are better at one than the other, right? I happen to be better at being super concise and technical writing. When I have to put color around it, I'm not as good at that. So it's not something I try to do as much of. If you've ever come across Danielle DiMartino, who
Oh,
I
yes.
okay, so Danielle, you've read her work, I'm
Yes.
sure. She is an
A
artist,
storyteller.
and a storyteller, an artist,
Yep.
brilliant, all of that. Yeah, and she writes in a way that I never could, but I'm so impressed by that. So I think everybody has their own style.
Well, your style is very poised when you're presenting, and yes, disciplined. There's a structure to it which makes people feel like they can understand. You do speak in clear, concise, and often very correct language. When you're on a
Thank you.
program, there was one time Kevin Leary was just so disingenuous. He just jumped out as just I can't even. I was so angry. The way that you held yourself after his rudeness was you just were elevated as far
Thank you.
as
It's
keeping
yeah, I
it
mean,
together and not jumping back, which is that restraint, that professionalism. He's a bully. It was just a bully move. And I was actually a little upset also that the women on the same panel, there was one actually who did come to your defense, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't
mhm.
enough. Do you ever feel like this has to change, and it has to change by standing up to those types who need to
Yeah,
stand
yeah.
down?
Yeah, I do tend to be somewhat non-confrontational, so that may have been just that at work, right? But I also, when I'm watching a network and they start going at it, when they start arguing and talking over each other, I honestly turn it off. I can't listen to that. I don't see the value in it. It kind of aggravates me, stresses me out. So certainly I wouldn't ever want to contribute to that. And, I think it usually comes from a place of ego. And, that's one thing that I hope that I don't have too much of, because it's a market. We're all trying to understand it together, and
Yeah.
we all have our tools, and we should respect each other's tools and backgrounds, as everybody can add value in their own way.
So, what are some platforms that you have really enjoyed contributing to? They have really kind of uplifted that message and that um, team oriented approach to collaboration versus confrontation.
Gosh, I mean, there are so many organizations that I've worked with, that I've been involved in. There's so many media outlets that have given me a showcase that I may not have even gotten if I wasn't a woman in the beginning. And then at first they say, we'd love to have more female voices here, right?
Yes.
And then it becomes, oh, well, actually, that was pretty interesting. So let's have you back. So I don't want to single out any, because I really am appreciative for the platforms that I have been given. So I don't want anyone to feel left out from that. But what I will say, it's the professional organizations, like the Chartered Market Technicians Association. Those organizations are all about elevating the discipline, but also in doing so, they're really making strides to helping elevate women in the business. They're doing their best to make sure that there is a female voice when there's presentations and conferences. And without them, I certainly wouldn't be here today doing this type of thing. They've really helped uh, forward my career. I think in 2001 is when I received my CMT designation. So I call it our version of the CFA.
Mhm.
A 3-level exam. It was a big undertaking
Yep.
at that age, and at the time, I became the youngest female to have received the designation. So that was a really exciting moment for me, and they were the ones
Indeed.
that pointed it out, and I'll never forget that. I just think it was a really cool feeling, and now, thankfully, that's totally not the case. I mean, there's far younger women that are receiving it, and it goes to show that they've really done a good job penetrating some of the universities with the content. And I'll go back to my alma mater, which has the student managed investment fund. They previously would not have really incorporated technical analysis, and now I
Now
sort of
they do.
listen into their calls and try to give a little input. And all of those moments where you're giving your input to a student managed fund that has half women, right? So
Yes.
they haven't gotten to the point where they've decided either between family or career, or where they've had their first job and felt uncomfortable on Wall Street or whatever it may be. So they're still very sort of bright eyed and ready to take on the world. And if you can inspire them at a younger age to pursue this, I think that's really incredible. So I welcome those kinds of
I'm
opportunities.
excited about that as well. The CFA does a really good job. 50% of their presenters at any event will be women. CMT
Right.
has work to do in that regard. But
Yeah, they do, but they are, it is a mandate, and they're trying. It's hard because it is a very, almost like a small discipline still by
yes,
comparison.
that's true. Hmm.
Yeah. So the pool of talent, that's all that they have to work with. So I wouldn't ever discredit that, because I do think that there's a big push for it. And having I just again, I think of just my own personal experience as being supported and being friends with some of the greatest technical analysts in the world, in my opinion. They've given me access to not just amazing content, but really amazing people. And never once have I felt, lesser or anything as a woman. In fact, at times it differentiates me, I think, in a positive way. So, yeah, I would
And
put
there
it that way.
and there are more women for sure. I mean, just statistically, Schwab said more women signed up for new accounts in the past year than men.
Yeah,
So
isn't
this
that
COVID
great?
has had a she session, unfortunately, impact on women um, out of work and with childcare and such. And there have been more women who've signed up for brokerage accounts than men,
No,
which right
that's really
now
cool. It's
is
exciting to
really
hear.
tough because the market is incredibly difficult.
This is true. And I
I
think
worry
that there's
about that a
been,
lot.
well, there's been so much new interest in the markets, and I think right there it's starting at a younger age because of the access to information that we all have now, which is something that wasn't the case before. We're no longer taping up the charts on our walls. it's
Yeah.
it's so, and the younger generation is coming in with a knowledge of technology that they can leverage,
And
that
wicked smart.
yeah, well, we
Just
can we can learn from them, that's for sure. So it's really exciting. I think that some of them might that are trying trading without having really done their homework. They might learn the hard way early on, but better to learn it early on, right?
this is
Instead
true.
of later in your career.
Yeah, this is true. So when you are looking at also your client base, do you see more women coming in as clients?
Yes, I have to say there's definitely a lot of female investment advisors who I work with and I really respect, and they'll have teams of people that are working for them. They really are getting into this stuff. I don't think it's a new development. I wouldn't say that I'm seeing a new influx or anything like that. But consistently, I've had that sort of balanced interest. So I just think that when you have a woman managing a team, it just adds a nice dimension, especially if you're also, an advisor, right? You're trying to bring in families and manage their money. And it's nice to have a woman who can give that sort of um, input, right? Just from her own personal
Well,
experience.
I also say, there is no meritocracy without the voice of women, and 86% of advisors are men. So it's been changing, but very, very slowly. And this is why this is another good reason why I want to kind of elevate, if you will, this conversation, so
Yeah.
women who do watch this can see what they can be and say, "Hey, Katie, why not? Katie did it. I can do it." There's a
I
little
hope so
little
too.
push
I
to
mean,
level up.
I think it's great what you're doing, just, exposing women to other women that are either trading or in some kind of related seat. I think that just right there, you've accomplished something with it. And, there's a lot of research out there on having a woman, well, whether it's on a board or as
Oh
a
yeah.
money manager, right? That they're adding a dimension that you can actually monetize, right? It's more profitable to have the female voice, whether it's on a board or as a portfolio manager. So with that balance now becoming something that you can actually measure, I think that's great. It just kind of adds some metrics around it.
I have the cat jumps up at near 5 o'clock saying it's time to feed me. So don't, sorry for the distraction.
It's
It's her
okay.
usual cameo. She knows it. I swear she's got a little starstruck thing. But yes, I'm
Cute.
making sure that this is, oh, I have done lots on writing articles on this subject because there is still this imbalance. It's not just, income inequality, but the wealth inequality
Mhm.
is far greater. So women increasing their wealth is incredibly important to society, but also the economy. So we need to
That's right, right. So it all comes back full circle, right?
100%. It's a good all around. It's,
Hmm.
so privilege is invisible to those who have it, meaning, it's been for sure male dominated in trading and analysis and in ownership of, of these firms. It is going to change slowly, then all at once, however it works. I don't care, but giving conversation to it and then showcasing, okay, but there's some really amazing women. So the comment that just came in, it's really it's wonderful that you take the time to do this because it's a hobby that I have, if you will, but it's also incredibly important, I think, to the business of promoting and supporting women in trading and finance, that they kind of feel that they can connect. And one of the things that I did a few years ago when I did this thing on my own, which is, try and find the women who were doing this on their own, either for retail or for institutional. And this was like, how do you network? How are you promoting? How are you, you know, doing what you do? And then I started building a FinTwit list, Voice of Women,
Okay.
and it's over 500 now.
Oh, great.
But it
Great.
was very hard to find initially.
Right, right, because you don't even know if they're women or not at times from.
Well, no, but I've kind of figured that out.
Yeah, good.
But it's been a few years of building that list. And so I definitely,
And I'm sure it's a growing list, right?
it
Just
is a
based
growing list
on,
and I see
yeah.
it now more, especially with crypto.
Yeah, and
Oh my
I've
goodness.
noticed even on Twitter, there's a lot of advocating. So at times I'll be included on a list of other women to say, hey, here's some women to listen to. And they list out 10 Twitter handles or something like that. And I just think it's fantastic because it's exposure, but it's also with a good cause, right?
But it's more than just the cause. Women, especially when it comes to learning from other women, I think we have some natural teaching ability, but there's also this um, flexibility in thinking, and they can feel, at least for example, in my chat, in my trading room, it's not a male thing, right? Where there's a lot of bravado and chest pounding, and the YouTube video, so I don't have to say it. So it's a very different environment, and they
Mhm.
need to find those out there that represent their personality and their style of investing. This is something, and I've been doing it a little while. You've been doing it a little while. We think of it as next, right? It's not a
Mhm.
drama.
Yeah.
We're wrong. Damn it, why? But it's always with great care to try and position, this is good, this is good, this looks risky, this is not safe. Like we
Mhm.
have different variabilities of measuring risk that I think has a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah, I
value
think
to the
that's it. I think
portfolio
that's key
return.
right there is risk tolerance and just how we approach decision making. So there's all sorts of elements to that that can be very, very valuable. I think not just in analysis, but in trading, investing, portfolio management, it just adds a dimension. And it starts a conversation perhaps where maybe it wasn't started before. So I agree with you. I think it's a great push, and I think it's going the right direction. I hope that it's in our careers that we see it to a point where we're it's not 86%, male advisors, and
Mhm.
certainly greater progress than that. But I think the trends are good, and being a trend follower, I'm all for it. I
Oh,
spoke to a
awesome.
big time CEO at a cryptocurrency firm recently, and he said that he's 1,000% behind hiring women, and there is about I think more than half of their employees already in this very fast growing company are women.
Awesome. All very good data points, and the story is it's definitely it, good for society and good for the economy. So we're on a good trend. I like the way you put that. Well, I want to say thank you again very much. And
Yep,
your site is Fairlead Strategies. You
that's
are
right.
um, adding crypto. I love this, and you obviously do a very good technical review of markets that um, I have basically looked at as very, again, disciplined, and this adds a lot of value, especially when the market is doing its little, Jagger like moves. So,
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something that we can rely upon to add some clarity and take out some of the emotion when it gets volatile like this, right? And then there's always ways to take advantage of any kind of market. So
oh
I
yeah,
think that even a market that's ripping higher, we can find short setups. So there's a lot to do at all times, and that's what we're trying to make sure that we always have actionable, timely ideas for folks to take advantage of. But at the same time, making sure that the top-down views, S&P 500, et cetera, are really, setting the tone. So we'll provide more short ideas in this kind of environment where we think there's room for a greater pullback, and then we'll balance it back towards the longs once we feel like we've bottomed, that type of thing. And I just think it's a great discipline, something that's complementary to what a lot of people are already doing. One thing that our clients value the most, I think, in what we do is just to give technical feedback on their existing positions when they've entered those positions completely without an eye towards the technicals. They see value in knowing the levels and knowing the risk metrics from our perspective, and I think that that's just going to make them more successful.
And do you have I see a trial with your product. Do you have any free blog or other way of
I have Twitter. I'm not very prolific on Twitter. I'm working on it. I'm trying to get better. So we have a Twitter handle. We do post most of our media and appearances on our website. So we have
good?
a media and events
Hmm.
page. We offer a free 1 month trial for all of our research.
That's
So
very
that's
generous.
well, we're happy to do it because we want to make sure that it fits someone's process, because we understand it's not for everyone, and there's really no way to know that without spending a little bit of time with it. And we always try to make sure that folks have some insight into the methodology from us as well. We do quarterly calls with folks, walk them through a big sort of longer term chart deck. So we do a lot to make sure that our subscribers know that they can access us, and it's been great. So any support is welcome, of course. And we're going to try to keep it very professional and institutional in its quality,
Hmm.
and just add more services. I finally just hired somebody to start with me in June, so I'm thrilled for that.
Oh,
Need some help.
congratulations.
Thank
Okay,
you.
well, summer training when the market's nice and quiet.
Yeah, there you go. Right. I know it has been busy.
Well, the fall, I thought winter was quite eventful for projects, and now the summer is supposed to be the boring trading, right? Thin trading, and everyone's on vacation. Now it's just starting to heat up.
Well, I know sell in May and go away doesn't really work for us, does it?
No, but I would like to take August off.
I know, and travel, right? Go somewhere international. Alas, who knows, right?
It's happening slowly but surely. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I
Of course,
really
Samantha.
appreciate
It's been
it.
really nice. I love the conversation, and thank you.
I want to just remind folks where you can find Fairlead Strategies, and then at the end, I will upload this video to my YouTube channel. And I want to thank you again very, very much, Katie, for participating. I am excited that you're doing really, really well. And thank you, Mark Newton, for this introduction. Last but not least, it will be on Spotify and Audible and Apple as a podcast. So there you go. We can access lots of ways. And next Tuesday, I am excited, just real quick, to introduce. I have got the Wolf of not Wall Street, sorry. Crypto is coming up in a big way, so we're going to have next Thursday a discussion with Scott. Some of you know already from his crypto. I'm trying to find his handle here on YouTube real quick, but I can't find it. Okay, check my site. I'm gonna post this. It has not been announced yet. We just got that confirmed. So we're gonna have Scott on for next Thursday. Big following. He's got like 300,000 followers on Twitter, and he's a crypto guru. So we're gonna go dig in and find out how he feels about the recent news and regulation and Bitcoin pullback. So thank you all for joining, and I wish you a great rest of the week.